Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you some of the basic tools I use in the Exposure tab when I'm editing a photograph. The first thing that I notice about this photograph is the top edge and the left and right corners are a little darker than the rest of the photograph. This is often caused by shooting a lens with the aperture wide open. To correct this, we can go over to the Lens Tool tab, come down to Light Fall Off, and drag this over until those areas are more in balance with the rest of the photograph. Now we'll come back to the Exposure Tool tab and come down to White Balance. Now the default for white balance is the white balance that was set in the camera when the photograph was taken, and that's what the shot mode means. We could also take a look and see what daylight setting looks like, the cloudy setting, and shade. And sometimes these are good starting points. In this case, let's move it back to shot. The next thing that we can do is go to the Kelvin Slider and drag it until the white balance is set correctly, and also fine-tune it with tint. And finally, we can use the Eyedropper tool if we have something in the image that is an appropriate shade of gray or pure white, and it looks like we have someone in a white shirt down here. So let's click on the Eyedropper tool and click on this person's white shirt. And while that didn't make a big difference, it did warm the image up just a little bit. Now to turn the eyedropper back off, I'm going to click on the arrow tool. Now moving down, we have the exposure tool. And while this image is pretty well exposed, it's still a little bit dark if you take a look in the trees and in the shadow areas. So I'm going to bring that exposure up just a little bit to about there. We'll come back to contrast, brightness, and saturation a little bit later. Now the next thing I typically set is levels, and in the default view, levels is down below high dynamic range. I'm going to move it up one. I'm going to click on it, drag it up above high dynamic range, let go, and now levels is set there. Now let's take a look at levels. What levels does is it looks at the data across the entire image from darkest to lightest, and it adjusts the endpoints and the mid-range to fit that data. Now the automatic tool works very well. In Capture One Pro 20. The one thing that I do that makes it work even better is I come up to the Capture One Pro 20 Preferences. I go to the Exposure tab. And instead of the default of RGB channel for channel mode in the Levels tool setting, I changed it to red, green, and blue channels. What this does is it allows it to adjust the range in all three channels independently. With that set, I'm going to click on the magic wand and auto adjust the levels. Now when we take a look at the red, green, and blue, you can look at these numbers down here and see what I'm talking about. Now the blue is set from 13 to 251, green is 12 to 253, and red is 13 to 254. So while it's a small amount, it is different for each one of the color channels. And what this can do is this can help to eliminate a color cast and also to bring the photograph into better overall adjustment. With that set, let's go back up and take a look at contrast. Now, if I slide the contrast to the right, it's going to add some. With contrast, you want to be very light-handed with it. We're going to slide this up just a little bit to add a little bit of contrast to the image. And we're going to take a look at brightness. And in this case, I'm going to bring the brightness down or move it to the left because it's a little too bright. Now brightness deals with midtones, and so what I'm doing is I'm looking in the midtones of the image and I'm bringing those down just a bit. Now going to high dynamic range down below levels, this image is very bright, and if you take a look at the foreground here, it's so white that we can't see any of the details, and it also makes it harder to see the details in the statue. So if I click on the highlight slider and I drag it to the left, you can see that the details begin to show. Now we don't want to push it too much. If I take it all the way to there, that seems like a little too much. If I bring it back just a little bit, just to where the details begin to show, that seems about right. Now, taking a look at the trees and the shadow areas within the statue, it looks a little on the dark side, so let's bring up shadows. About there. Now the white and black allow us to set the white and black points in the image using the high dynamic range tool. So let's take a look and see what happens. I'm going to bring the white point down just a little bit, and I'm going to take a look at the black, and I'm going to reduce the amount of black in this image just a little bit so the details show through better.